Okay. All right. Are there any other questions on the quiz or on that material from yesterday? Okay. All right. Before we proceed, I want to, because I'll forget or run out of time at the end, and I just want to give you an update on the final and where I am with that. So I've got it worked out. I'm still building it in Sibelius in my software. So, but it's going to kind of, let me just give you a verbal explanation of it. I'm going to give you a melody and chord progression to a jazz standard, and I'm going to have you build the chords underneath it, identify the Roman numerals with it as best you can. We're not going to get into a ton of Roman numeral analysis, but so I'm going to grade that part pretty loosely. And I think that was about it. So it's going to be pretty simple. And then there'll be a bonus point on who can identify the actual tune. I think most of you will probably get that. It's a pretty well-known jazz standard, but anyway, there might be a couple other things that off the top of my head I'm not remembering, but it's going to be pretty easy. It'll be almost like an overnight assignment. You could turn it in. Then our Friday gathering should be relatively short. We'll get together next Friday, go over the finals, and then do a little more listening and talk about a couple of bonus things that aren't really in the curriculum, but I think are really interesting that you might want to know. Okay. So that's it. I'll have that for you. I'll be able to upload that on Monday. And I'm sorry. And you're going to also build that's one of the things you're going to build the chord scales that go with those groups of chords. So we'll start to when we do common chord progressions, you're going to start to see chords not as standing alone individually, but in groups, and what they mean when they're in groups, how to identify the groups of chords, and how they make chord progressions that are commonly seen in jazz. Okay. All right. But today we're going to talk about chord families and the corresponding scales that are commonly used as material for writing jazz and improvising. So where did my Sibelius go? There it is. Okay. New section here. All right. So far we've talked about the four basic chords that we have, chord types of chords that we have. We have major quality chords, minor quality chords, dominant quality chords, and that was it. The three families, sorry. Major chords, dominant chords, and minor chords. And then diminished chords and augmented chords, we're going to see today that they belong to the dominant family. Okay. So as yesterday, when we started building all those extensions, that the dominant family of chords, the dominant chords just have a lot more going on than some of the other, than minor or major chords. The same is true when we talk about the types of chords that belong to the dominant family. And so some of this is going to be redundant, but we're going to talk quite a bit about diminished chords and how they work. I've already hinted at that, but we're going to talk about fully diminished chords as well as half diminished chords, and we'll get to that. All right, so let's start with major chords and the different notations that you might see and why they're major chords and not dominant chords. So I'm going to continue to use C This applies to any note, but C is just easier to read because there are fewer accidentals involved. Okay. So we have 7 basic chords in the major chord family. And remember, I said in jazz, we don't tend to use triads very frequently, right? It's becoming a little more common, as I said, with more modern music. There's a crossover that's occurring that has occurred in the last 10 years between classic rock, pop music, and jazz. So a lot of jazz musicians are starting to incorporate those not only styles but harmonies a little more, simpler harmonies. But generally speaking, we don't use triads too often. So four note chords are kind of the standard. That's the basis of all this. So with that in mind, the very first, we talked about this yesterday, the first chord that belongs to the major chord families is the major 6 chord. That's the most basic, and this is seen more frequently in older music. In fact, let me grab this. I'm gonna hang on a second. I'm gonna grab a book real quick. And I mentioned that it's used a lot at the end of a tune. So in especially in older jazz standards. So here are a couple. I just randomly opened this book, and so there are a couple tunes here. "Easy to Love," a Cole Porter tune. "Fly Me to the Moon," and "Easy to Love" is in the key of G. "Fly Me to the Moon" is in the key of C. And I want you to look at the last chord in the melody. It just happens, because these are older tunes. So here's "Easy to Love." The last chord we see is G6. Um, and it happens before, like in the last 2 bars, before those chords in parentheses. There's G6. So the key of G major. The final chord is G6. It doesn't really occur anywhere else, but that's where we ultimately arrive. That's "Easy to Love." "Fly Me to the Moon," the same thing. The last chord, our arrival chord, is our landing chord is C6, C major 6. So you can see the last chord there. And these are older tunes. I could go through the book and probably show you 100 different examples of that. I'm not going to do that, but just to illustrate when that is most typically used is at the end of a tune. Sometimes at the beginning of a tune, if the one chord is the first chord of a song, you'll see that. Okay, let's keep moving here. So C6, very common major chord found in the major family. All right, who cares to take a stab at what we call this? If this is C6, what do we call this chord?
C6-9.
Yep, that's exactly right. So a lot of this is very logical. We just label it with what's in the chord. C6-9. And it's the same kind of thing. It just has a little more color to it. So here's C6. C6-9. Just a little more expansive and more shimmery. Okay. Again, using the same context. A lot of times at the end of a tune for an older style jazz standard. Okay. The next one is one we've seen already. Very, very common. C major 7. There's another chord that we'll see in this chord family. And then from here on out, it's basically extensions of the major chord. So let me just build them real quickly. And if you have a question, throw it out. I'm going to move fast here for the rest of the major chord family. Just like with the C6 chord, we can do the same thing with the C major 7 chord. C major 9. So here's the major 7. This is diatonic now. So far, we're all diatonic. C major 7, C major 9. So we just start to add more color and richness to the chords as we move. So I wrote this as C major 9 sharp 11. This is a chord we talked about yesterday. When we labeled it yesterday, we labeled it C major 7 sharp 11. I want you to see it like this. It's the same exact chord, but just like language, there are just different ways to say the same thing. And so as long as there is no qualifier before the number here, then we can assume all the extensions below that are diatonic. So C major 9 sharp 11 is the same as C major 7 sharp 11. It's just indicating that the composer wants you to include the 9. So if you're writing this music, you want people who interpret your music to include the major 7 and the 9 together. This is a good way to write it. But either way, players will just kind of fill in the chord themselves. They won't alter any alterations that you indicate, but they'll fill in the rest of the diatonic notes because jazz musicians like thick sounds. Okay. Let's see. And then we get major 13 chords, which is one we didn't talk about yesterday. Oops. I remember we talked yesterday about how major 7 quality chords never have a natural 11. And so we see that continue through here. Even when we build way up on top, we bury that 11 inside the chord more. That's still always a sharp because of that relationship to the third. We want to keep away from the third. So if we have an F, it gets really close to that E and it starts to interfere with that major quality sound. Okay. So this is a 13. The 13 actually happens to be the same if you look as the 6. You see that? However, when we want a 13, so if you're writing this music, if we write it a sixth away from the root in a jazz voicing, then we would call it a 6. If we write it farther up away, then we call it a 13. It's just a matter of octave placement, whether we're going to label that as a 6 or a 13. So there you go. Any questions about that chord, the C major 13 sharp 11? Let me play that one for you. Starts to get really pretty. Okay, now here is one that we didn't talk about yesterday, and it's kind of an outlier, but you will see it a lot. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on it, and it's not going to really come up in any quiz or test. I don't think, actually. Before I say that, I better check. No, it won't. So we're good there. Okay, but it does happen on occasion, and it's just kind of used um, to create a more open, expansive sound. Um, but it's not really functional, so it's difficult to use it. It's kind of an advanced sound, and but it does exist in nature. So it's called the C major 7 sharp 5. So we don't usually see it called C major augmented 7 or C augmented major 7. We don't really see it called that. We In fact, I don't think I've ever seen it called C major augmented. I've always seen it labeled C major 7 sharp 5 in this when we use it in the major 7 family. Okay? So it's one that you should be aware of, and you're free to use it. I think it'd be great to hear one of you write something that includes that, because it's a really interesting color, but it can be hard to use in a melody, um, because there's no dominant function, right? We don't have a G. If this is the one chord in C major, we've eliminated a 5 dominant 7 altogether. So that's why it's not used functionally as frequently as just a major. But it's interesting. I guess you could use it as like a passing chord. But here's the sound. And of course, you can build the major extensions above it that we use over here. 9, natural 9, sharp 11, and natural 13. Any questions about the major chords? Let's talk about the intervals really quickly. The important intervals are, again, between the root and the third. The C to the E is a major third, 4 half steps. The root to the 7th, the C to the B, 11 half steps. It's a major 7th. Those are the two really important intervals that make it a major 7 quality, make it land in the major family. The 6th and the 9, C6, C6, 9 are a little bit of an exception to that, but we still get the major third between the root and the third. Okay? And then the 5th becomes more important when we talk about diminished and augmented chords here, but what really makes it a major 7 quality is the 3rd and the 7th. Major 3rd, major 7. Any questions about major chords? We're going to move fast through these because we're going to spend a little more time with scales later today, and that's going to take more of our time. Okay, let's talk about the minor family. Let me do this. Yeah, okay. Oh, jeez. Okay, so yesterday I may have made an error when I talked to you about, I just briefly introduced the C minor 6 chord, and I realized that I did that, and I apologize. C minor 6. This is a little weird one to start with. Remember, 4-note chords are our foundation. So in a C minor 6, we actually use a natural 6, and that comes from what we call the melodic minor scale. We're not going to talk about that until we get to when do we get to that? We're going to talk about that on Monday when we talk about minor 2/5 progressions, because that is a scale that belongs to that family. But here we go. So this is the C minor 6. A little confusing. We don't use the A flat. This is an exception to a rule. We don't use diatonic for this minor 6 chord. We use the natural, so the major 6. So what makes it the minor 6 chord here is these major relationships between the root and the minor relationship between the root and the third, and a major 6. But if I invert this, if I move the 6 up an octave, the root up, then I've got a minor third here. So that's where we kind of get that minor-y sound. Let me play it for you. So listen, if I play a natural or an A flat or a minor 6, which occurs naturally in the key signature. It's pretty, but it rubs a little more. So it's not off limits, but this is this A natural is, sorry, I got that in the wrong place. There we go. Okay, any questions about that? I know that's maybe a little confusing. It's just something you need to know. You can use both the A flat or the A natural if you're brave, but the A natural is more commonly used to the major 6 in a C minor 6. All right. Here's one we've had. C minor 7. We've experienced that. And that can, now the interesting about C minor 7, as we'll see when we talk about chord progressions, is this is always a 1 chord. So this is always a root quality chord in a song. The C minor 6, just like C6 is always a 1 chord. But C minor 7 can be either a 1 chord or a 2 chord or a minor 4 or a minor 6. It has a lot of usage, so you can move that. It can be used in depending on the context. So it needs some interpretation, but no matter where you use it, it's always the same. C minor, so minor third on the bottom, minor 7th between the root and the 7th. And we just keep building up from here. We've done this. C minor 9. Just keeps getting a little more rich and colorful as we go up. We did this one yesterday. C minor 11. That was a mistake. Okay, so C minor 11. Now, just as a note, C minor 11 is by far the most popular minor chord for a 1 chord in jazz. So if I'm playing in C minor, if I'm writing something in C minor, this is the favorite for among modern jazz musicians and composers. And it's just because it allows us to use a sound that's really popular. Let me illustrate that real quickly. It's not really critical to the material, but it's an interesting. So because the F occurs in the chord, we get this sort of what we call quartal movement. So C up to up, C up a fourth to F, F up a fourth to B flat, QUART quartal, or I'm sorry, QUARDAL quartal. So that's like a quartet is 4 people, so it's the interval of a fourth. So here's the C minor 11, and then I'll just play a little melodic thing using that kind of quartal Is it T? I think it's T. Quartal. Here we go. So I included the E flat in there with it, but it creates a really expansive sound, and it's really beautiful. I'm kind of partial to minor keys. I think maybe some of you are too. I don't know what it is about minor keys, but I find them inspiring and warm. So, and this is a very popular choice for jazz composers and musicians as a one chord. Okay. Any questions about the C minor 11? All right. And then we get the same thing going up. So here on the C13, we tend to use A natural, but A flat you can use if you want, and then you'd call it a flat 13. But this is the same thing as the major up here, where we've got, it depends on the octave that you used, whether you call it a 6 or a 13 when you're writing this music. Okay? I don't think we deal with that too much in here. This is there is some pragmatism in jazz music in harmony. So again, whichever one you like, you can use the flat or the 13th. But I'm going to tell you, it's only fair for me to tell you that more commonly used 13 is the A natural, a major 13. Okay. And then the last one, this is where we get a diminished chord. Oops. So this belongs to the minor family. But as we'll see, sorry, that should be B flat. C minor 7 flat 5, or C half diminished 7. Same chord, different label. Okay. That belongs to the minor family, even though yesterday I kind of hinted at the fact that it's also related to the dominant family. So it's related to both, and we're going to talk about that as we move into this, how they both work for both. So here's that C half diminished 7. You can see clearly why it's considered a part of the minor chord family, because it has a minor third and a minor 7th, minor third, minor 7th, minor third, minor 7th. That carries through. The 5 changes, but the 2 notes that really determine the quality of a chord don't change. The 3rd and the 7th are both minor above the root. Here's the sound. Okay. And we'll see it again. It belongs to both families. So we'll see it again here when we get to dominance. I know we're moving fast, so if you need me to stop and back up, just speak up.
Real quick on the C13th chord that you wrote, is that supposed to be a C minor 13th?
Oh yeah.
Or is that?
No, you're right. Thank you. All right.
Sorry, I also have a question.
Sure.
this might be like major backpedaling, but when do you use the so like remember how we were talking about earlier how you either go up or fourth or down a fifth and you use that key signature? When do you
Mhm.
do that versus just use the key that like, the letter name that was given?
Yeah, I'm going to sidestep a little bit. I'm going to give you a short answer. It depends on the context. There are when I was talking about this a little bit, so this can be a minor 1 chord, it can be a minor 2 chord, it can be a minor 3 chord, it can be a minor 4 chord, it can be a minor 6 chord. It depends on the context in the music. We're not going to cover all the examples today, but when we get to common chord progressions next Tuesday, then we'll talk about the different places where you would use the same exact chord in context. We'll see it in some situations. So there's my brief sidestep answer, but I'll also say hang in there, keep that question in mind because it'll become more clear on Tuesday when we talk about common chord progressions. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
All right. That's the question I think I asked when I was in your chair also. Well, where do you know? How do you know when to use it? Okay. All right. Now the big one again. Dominant chords. That is not how you spell dominant. There we go. Again, I'm using C just because it provides the cleanest palette for us, but you apply these to any note, any root note. There are a lot. We're going to do 14 of these. Oh my gosh, I can't do that. Now I can do it. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14. Okay. It's a little cleaner. All right. So the first one is the basic one that we've covered. And yesterday we covered a lot of these as well. So some of this will be redundant. Okay. This is one we all know and love now. Just a plain old 7 chord. So that 90% of the time that acts as a 5 chord in a key. What we will see very soon, actually not very soon, next week, we're going to cover, sort of the roots of jazz are the blues, and the blues are kind of based on dominant chords. So this can also be used as a 1 chord in certain situations. A dominant 7 can be used as a 1 chord, especially in a blues. That's the most common 1 chord, and that'll become more clear when we talk about the blues next week. But I just want you to know that most of the time it's a 5 chord, but there are situations where it is not a 5 chord. Okay. And you can guess that's a C9 for the same reasons as the major and minor, just has a 9th in it. I'm going to jump. We're not going to do an 11 chord. We're just going to do the 13. This is where dominant chords differ from major or minor chords. Remember we said a major chord or a minor chord, the 13 or 6 usage just depends on which octave it's in. On dominant quality chords, so you notice the difference here is this has a qualifier before the number, a dash, as does the major, right? It has a triangle or the word major or capital M. In a dominant chord, we don't have a qualifier before that number. But if I move this A down an octave into the 6th position, I don't call it a C6 7, C7 6 or whatever. I still call it a C13. Okay, and that's because of that dominant 7 quality is so important. We want to make sure it's clear when we write it that this is a dominant quality, no qualifier before that. So it's just a C, still C13. That's unique to the dominant family. There's a lot of material here, isn't there? All right. And now we're going to do extensions. Okay. We did these yesterday, but I'll throw them up here real quick. Yesterday, we wrote this as C7 sharp 11, and that is correct. Today, we're going to write it as C9 sharp 11. I want you to see that both are correct, just like we talked about up here. The highest unaltered extension gets the number. However, C7 sharp 11 is also correct, and musicians will fill in the 9 themselves. But this indicates that you definitely want the 9 if you're writing it, right? You definitely want the players to leave it in there. So it's a clearer way, just another way. But know that common performance practice, if you write C7 sharp 11, most of the time they'll fill it in anyway. They'll put the 9th in there anyway. Okay. Pragmatism, again, is the word for the day when it comes to these chords. Lots of things work. Sorry, messed that up. Okay. Who knows what this chord is called? That's the beginning of it.
C7 flat 9.
Yep. This is my favorite. So let me illustrate why I like this one so much and why I think it's a very powerful chord quality. Here's the question. C7, we know that it's a dominant chord, so it's a 5 chord. We're assuming that. C7 is the 5 chord of what key?
F.
F. So we want to have smooth chord resolution. So let me change this chord. Oops. Make it a half note. Okay, I'm just going to do a quick, we won't do too much of this because this is not a jazz composition class. However, so in the key of C, I'm going to move to F major 7, right? Because it's a 5, and we've talked about how that leading tone wants to go up. Well, the smoothest resolution in any music is a half step resolution, moving it from a half step from one chord to another. So the closest note relationships we have right here. This D flat creates another very close relationship with a chord tone in F. Get rid of that. There we go. The D flat now moves down by a half step to the 5th of F, C. If I have D natural, it can still work, but it's a little bit further away. So this is a lot closer and a little smoother and has a little more tension in the dominant chord. Let me play both the C7 or the C7 natural 9 or the C9 moving to F major 7, and then I'll play the C7 flat 9. I want you to hear the difference and why a lot of jazz musicians will use flat 9. In fact, if they see a dominant 7 indication and no indication that there is a major 9 required, a lot of times they'll use a flat 9 because it provides smoother melodic movement. So here we go. Here's the C7 natural 9 or the C9. You do a more smooth chord progression or resolution. Now here's the flat 9. I hope you can hear that tension on the flat 9 and how it really wants to, feels like it needs to go somewhere. So not critical for our purposes, but it'll be, if you ever take jazz composition or arranging, you'll be ahead of the game if you you know why we use flat 9 a lot. Especially modern players and modern composers will use it. Okay. Now we get to an interesting one. And this is exactly what you'd expect it to be. C7 sharp 9. My dog just showed up next to me. C7 sharp 9. Okay. And it's, you know, it's what it is. It's the 9th natural 9 is D. When we raise it up a half step, we call it a sharp 9. And this provides an interesting sound. So this is used a lot in funk music, in the blues. It's used a lot because another way to write this, D sharp is enharmonic to E flat. So this is another way you can write C7 sharp 9, a more pragmatic way, right? And the reason that's so bluesy, it's written like this a lot, is because then we start to see that we've got a minor third and a major third next to each other, which creates a very bluesy sound for source material. So here's what it sounds like in a melodic sense. I think it's easier to hear that way. C, E flat, E. Yeah, you can hear that E flat toggle between the E flat and E natural, and how that creates a real blues oriented sound. So very popular in the blues and in R&B and funk, that kind of thing, used a lot. So once again, let me just include that. It can be written either as D sharp or E flat. Either one is acceptable. Yeah, whichever one you like to look at the best. I tend to like this because I'm not mixing sharps and flats. It's easier on my eyes. But it doesn't matter. Either one, whatever you prefer. Okay, the next one. Any questions about that? This is not cooperating today. There we go. C7 sharp 5. What's another word? What's another label for that we saw yesterday? Anybody remember?
Is it C or alt?
Yeah. So we can do, it can also be C altered. Or C augmented 7. I guess, on rare occasions I've seen this C augmented 7, but not very often. I'll put that in parentheses because that it does it. I do recall seeing that in some places, but not very common. So those are some of the other, and they all mean the same thing. C7 sharp 5. So really quickly, the usage of this chord, generally speaking, we talked about it yesterday, was to use this as a 5 chord in a minor key. So we alter the 5 chord a little bit in the minor key because this C7 is the 5th of F minor in a minor key, so F minor. The 3rd of F minor is A flat. This G sharp is the same as A flat. It's enharmonic. Those sound the same. Sound the same. So that makes for a very smooth transition. There's a lot more in common. So you'll see that a lot used quite frequently. And I think when I've notated this on the homework or this comes up on the final, because the tune we're playing is in G minor, the tune we're going to work. So you'll see D plus 7 on there a lot for the 5 chord. Okay, so you're going to get a chance to build that and identify it, and throw a scale in there that you would use as a color palette, a note palette. Okay, so C7 sharp 5 or C7 altered or C7 or C augmented 7. Actually, you know what? I should just mention this, that this is, it depends on the composer and their preference, but I've seen it written like that too. C7 augmented. It's the same thing. All right. Means the same thing. Okay. Moving on. What are we doing here? Oh, yeah. Okay, this is C13 flat 9. It's another chord. It's it's just an extension of the C7 flat 9. Sometimes that will include the sharp 11. A lot of times not, because well, it's just a preference thing, but I think most guys like the 13 to kind of stick out, and the F sharp kind of starts to dominate because it's so foreign to the key. So that's a common usage of it without the 11. C13 flat 9. I'll fix that in a second. Okay, so here's an interesting one. And actually, I want to make this a half note. Oh, no, I don't. I want to put 2 labels on it. Okay. So this one is called C7, you might guess. So we've got a G sharp here, which looks like it's going to be augmented. But when we see it with this flat, with the sharp 9, with the D sharp, I'm going to write it as E flat just to keep the accidentals away from each other so it's easier to read. So when we see it with the E flat, we call that a C7 flat 13, sharp 9. It's a lot of information, I know. You're not going to be required to memorize it. Make sure you're writing this down so you can use it as a reference. This is the common label for it. C flat 13, sharp 9. And that's because this G sharp, if we take it up an octave, it can also be called a flat 13. A flat and G sharp are enharmonic. That's another way to look at it. But I wanted you to see, because I'm going to I'm not going to have if I have that A flat, I will not have a regular 5. We take it out because they rub against each other. Sounds like a mistake. Sounds like a Bugs Bunny cartoon. Yeah, so we don't use the A flat and the G natural together. Okay? And everybody understand why we don't use the A flat and the G, the natural 5 and the flat 13 together, because of that kind of clashy, clunky sound. So this can also be called this. Actually, I guess I do need to do this as a half note. Can also be called this. Sharp 9, sharp 5. Same chord, different location for the G sharp or the A flat. Okay? In fact, that's fine. I was going to say, I think I see this more, but yeah, I think I do see sharp 9, sharp 5 a little more frequently than this, but that will show up just so you know that they're identical chords. Just it has to do with the octave placement of that A flat or G sharp. Okay, we can just keep altering these, and I mean that's the interesting thing about dominant chords is you can alter forever, seemingly, but these are the most commonly used alterations. Okay, C7 sharp 11, flat 9. That's very common. Did that wrong. Here we go. Here's one we saw yesterday that belongs, although it doesn't have a third in it, and we said all dominants have a major third and a minor seventh. We still call it a dominant because it has the minor seventh. It has no third, so it's still a dominant because of the minor 7. And the reason it's not this, right? So minor 7 can note above the root can belong to either a dominant family or a minor family chord. The reason it's not called a minor 7 sus4 is because of the resolution that wants to occur that we hear. So C7 sus4, that F is a half step away from the third E, so it's suspended above that. Suspensions are never suspended for a greater distance or interval than a half step. So if this were minor, that would be the interval of a whole step. So it can't be a suspension. So it's really about the reason we only use that in a dominant family and suspended chords in general for a major quality chord is that the suspension has to be a half step away from whatever note it's going to resolve to. or it wants to resolve to. However, I will say that the dominant 7, so the C7 sus4, rarely resolves to just straight C7. It's used as a standalone in very modern music, and we indicated that yesterday, I think, when we played that tone. It's just a very modern sound, and so it's used as a 1 chord a lot. Sometimes a 5 chord. I use it as a 5 chord because I think it kind of masks the harmony and makes it more interesting and to hear. So there you go. All right, just a couple more. You can do the same thing. This is getting a little redundant, but the same thing. Oops. Jeez. Okay, C9 sus, same thing as the C7 with a 9 on top. Now here's the one that's going to be difficult for us. Well, actually, let's do this one first. So the C, I remember we said that the C half diminished 7 belongs to both the minor quality family because of the minor 3rd and the minor 7th, but it also belongs to, it kind of, it's like a stepchild here. It belongs to both families. So let me build it first again. Jeez. Okay. I'm going to get this. Here we go. All right. Okay, so here's why it belongs to the dominant family, and I illustrated that before. C is the 5th of oh, wait a minute. Okay, don't think of this in terms of that. So if I put a major 3rd underneath the root, so if I add a note to the chord down here, now all of a sudden I have A flat, C, E flat, G flat, B flat. I have a dominant 9. Where is it? There it is. A dominant 9 chord, in the key that becomes A flat 9 in the key of D flat. So the only difference between these two is the root. And a lot of times, I know this sounds counterintuitive, but a lot of jazz composers will just not use a root in their chord voicings. Or if they do use it, they'll have one person playing it and it'll be the bass player, and that'll be it. And everybody else is voiced as a half diminished 7 above that. Okay? So that's the relationship. I hope you can see that. Let me build one more in a different key so that you can see that a little better. Let me do a little progression here. Okay, so C minor 9 is the 5 chord. I'm sorry, C9 is the 5 chord here to F, okay? And we can see the resolution. If I take this C out, now we have E half diminished 7, which is the 7 chord, the naturally occurring 7 chord, 7/7 chord in the key of F major. So there we can see the usage very clearly, I think. All right. the same. It has a very, very similar function. It has the same resolutions to there, to there, okay, to there. The only thing that's missing is this C, which would make it a C7 or a C9. So does everybody understand now, looking at this, why that half diminished is belongs to the dominant family as well? Does that make sense? Anybody need more clarification? Okay. All right, and now finally, this is the one that is the most complex, so you're going to need to hang in there, and please ask questions on this one. Keeping the key of C, or I'm sorry, the key of F in mind. Keeping the key of F, because we're doing all these C dominant chords which belong to F, either F major or F minor, right? Everybody got that? Okay, so it's C is the fifth of F. We're going to throw a curveball in here. Okay, what is this chord called? Can anybody tell me? These are all in root position.
C sharp minor 6.
Almost. That's another way to label it. I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, C sharp minor 6 is C sharp minor minor 6 is one way. But actually, we talked about this when we did the minor. We built chords on the minor scale. This is a C sharp fully diminished, or C sharp whole diminished, or C sharp diminished. Remember that chord? So as odd as it sounds, this is a very advanced concept, but it is used a lot in this music. So this is probably I think the hardest to get your head around that we're going to do today. All right, so the C sharp diminished can be used as a substitute. Smaller. Can be used as a substitute for C7 flat 9. Let me copy this measure, put it down here, so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so let me build a C7 flat 9 next to it, and maybe you'll see. I'll just call out the notes as I go. C does not occur in this chord. However, just like we did over here, where this becomes a substitute for an A flat, we eliminate the root, an A flat 7. We eliminate the root in this chord when we use it as a substitute. So root's not that important. The things that are important are the quality of the third and the fifth, or third and the seventh. Okay, C7 flat 9. So here's E. E occurs in that chord. Here's the seventh. The fifth, sorry. The fifth occurs in that chord. Here's the seventh. B flat is enharmonic with A sharp. Both occurs in both chords. This is the fun one. The flat 9 is D flat, which is enharmonic with C sharp. So it has all the same notes, E, G, B flat, D flat, plus a root down here as the C sharp fully diminished or whole diminished, the C sharp diminished chord. Okay? So that's why it's used as a substitute for C7 flat 9, which I told you is probably the most popular dominant chord of it is an all-time jazz favorite, the flat 9 chord. And so much so that we have different ways of spelling it. Okay, we can also spell it this way, although it's hard to see because here we're using flats, here we're using sharps. And we don't call it the same root, right? We're stepped away from C as the root. C sharp is the root. Let me do one more. Let me do this. G7 flat 9. Okay, so over here, now here's a little clue. This is the root is a half step above the substitute of the root it's substituting for. So what would the fully diminished or whole diminished substitute for G7 be? What is this? Let's start with the root. What would be the root of that chord? What's the diminished chord that would substitute for G7 flat 9?
G sharp is the root.
Yeah, G sharp, or more commonly we would call it A flat, just because you end up with a lot of sharps when you end up with a B sharp and some other stuff. Okay, so A flat diminished is going to be the chord. What did I just do? So let's build the A flat diminished. What's the next note? What's the third?
C flat.
C flat. This is tricky. The fifth.
E flat.
Not E flat, because E flat would be the perfect fifth above A flat, right? So it would be E double flat, which we hate. We don't like double flats. So E double flat is enharmonic to D. So we would write it as a D. But it is technically E double flat. Everybody understand that? So it looks a little different over here. The pragmatism of jazz. We want, right? Okay, and then the diminished seventh of A flat. So here's how we get there. We can go down one half step to G, A flat to G down. That's major 7. Lower that G by another half step to G flat to get a minor 7. To get a diminished 7, go down another half step from G flat to F. So F. So that's our A flat diminished chord. And let's look at the things that we have in common. Let's change. So A flat. There it is. F, D, C flat is enharmonic to B. So we did it right. Does everybody see I know it's, I think it's pretty clear, but if it's not clear, please let me know, because that is an advanced concept, but it is one that you will see quite frequently in especially more advanced jazz compositions.
Wait, maybe I missed this bit of information, but how did we get A flat from G?
Yeah, because that's a good question. So just like over here, we said we've been dealing with C all the way across the board. So we're staying with the C family, but C sharp diminished belongs to the C family, because all these C7, C9, all these C dominant chords belong to the key of F. C sharp diminished belongs to the key of F, because it's a substitute for C7 flat 9 because of these similarities. A sharp is the same as B flat. Here they sound the same. G is in the chord E, E. C sharp is the same as D flat. Up an octave. So then when we did this on G, the diminished substitute chord for G7 flat 9, this is a half step above, C sharp's a half step above C, A flat is a half step above G. That's how we got the A flat. It's the same relationship, just in a different key, right? Incidentally, what key is this in? G7 flat 9 is not in the key of G. What key is that in?
C.
C, yeah, I heard a lot of that. Because G is the fifth of C. So we're talking about 5 chords up here, dominant chords. A 5 chord is the same thing as a dominant chord. So this is the key of G, or the key of C, sorry. This, although it doesn't look anything like anything in the key of C major, it's still in the key of C major because it's just a substitute chord for the actual dominant 7 flat 9 chord. Tricky, but that's its most common usage. Now, we did experience the diminished chord as a diatonic chord in the key of C, well, in this case D major, right? Or D minor, I'm sorry. D minor, but D harmonic minor. But it's not used very frequently in that key. It can be used as a substitute. Actually, I guess it is used as a substitute. It's the same thing, just going a different direction. But this is the most common usage in a major key. We use it more frequently in a major key. So this would be C major. G7 is the 5 chord of C major. And so that diminished substitute is more commonly used in a major key context. Got it? This one makes my brain hurt even after doing this for 35 years. I still, when I see that, I really have to think because it really steps outside the key. Okay. But there it is. So that's a little advanced calculus for you for your homework tonight. I don't know if this was on the homework or not. Let me see. Yeah, it is. It does occur in the homework. So be careful with that. Number 3, G diminished 7. We're going to make you, actually, we're not going to make you, we're just going to put a scale with that. So so you get off the hook there. So most of now, I know we only have 45 minutes here. We're going to push through. I hope everybody's okay with that because we need to get through these scales in order for to do your homework tonight, because the homework is all building scales. This is all really important to know, but then how do we okay, we throw a chord in there, but then what are our note options for actually writing melodies? It's not just the chord, because then there's no stepwise motion. It's pretty limiting. So we use scales that correspond to these chords that help us make more interesting melodies. And now we're going to get to that. All right, I need to add some measures here. So I'm going to move really fast again. I'm going to only cover... Okay, we're going to talk about a couple of modes. And actually, we're going to talk about... I'll review real quickly things that we've already discussed, because we've already discussed some of these. But there are some things a couple that are going to be new. So let me really quickly review. We call these... Sorry, I don't know what's going on. We call these chord scales because they are scales that belong to chords. Okay. So a couple of the ones that we've talked about already, this is the inverted diminished. Do you remember that one? Or the diminished scale starting on a half step. And we talked about it's a symmetrical scale because the relationship with it, the intervals in an octave, in the span of an octave, are symmetrical, right?
Mike, would you mind zooming in a little bit to just?
Oh, yeah, sure. Sorry
Thank
about that.
That's okay.
Yeah, the more I add to this, the farther away we're going to get. Appearance. No, view. There we go. There we go. Is that better? Okay. Get you over here. I'm going to write that as a sharp so we can see the stepwise motion a little better. Okay, so there's the inverted diminished, and we're not going to write all the intervals, but remember, again, it was half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half, whole, right? Half whole, half whole, half whole. So this is diminished scale starting on a half step. Now the chord that family that this belongs to is this. The dominant family. It belongs to the dominant family of chords. So you can use this on any dominant 7 chord, and they share the same root. Okay, and if I build, let me build a chord with all of these notes in it really quickly on the 1 chord. Sorry. Okay. So this is a big chord. I need more room. This chord is this is like a kitchen sink chord we talked about yesterday. G7 or G13. Sharp 11, sharp 9, flat 9. Oh, I didn't do it as a chord. What's going on here? G13. It's not giving me the symbol. Let me try it again. Sorry about that. Let me just call it a G7. Okay, plus we have a 13 in there too, but so you can see that. So it's got all these notes in it that are still dominant, right? B, B, D, F, the A flat here. The B flat is the same as A sharp. It's enharmonic. The C sharp, the E natural is the 13th. C sharp's the sharp 11. So that's why it belongs to the dominant quality, or the dominant family. So the inverted diminished scale is a dominant scale. Does that make sense to everybody? So we start to see that we can identify what family a chord scale belongs to by looking for the quality of is there a major third in there somewhere? Is there a minor 7 in there somewhere? Right? That makes sense? Or is there a minor third and a minor 7? In this case, we can explain away the minor third as a sharp 9. But the only way we can explain the major third is to call it a major third. So that's why this is a dominant family scale. Okay. So the other one that's diminished, we talked about the just plain old diminished scale. And let me see, which one should I build this on? I'm going to give you a freebie for your homework. We'll build it on the one that's in your homework. F. So diminished scale we said was symmetrical, whole, half, whole, half. This is half, whole, half, whole. This is whole, half. So whole step to G, half step, A flat, whole to B flat, half to B, whole to C sharp, oops. Sorry about that. Whole to, or half to D, whole to E, and then half to F, okay? Diminished quality scale. And this is used over diminished chords. Pretty simple. There's F, A flat, B. That's our diminished. That's our diminished triad, and it doesn't have an E flat in it, which would be the minor 7, which would make it a half diminished chord. It has a D, which is the diminished 7th. So this is used on F diminished 7 chords, or F diminished chord. Either you could call it either one, but F diminished 7 chords. Okay. So F diminished 7. Now we said that belongs to both the minor and the dominant family. So you can use it on either minor or dominant scale. And that depends on the context. Don't really need to, yeah, we'll need to identify that. So in your homework, you'll see there is an identify that what scale goes with the diminished 7 chord. And there you go, the diminished scale. So those are ones we've had before. We had Mixolydian. What time? Yeah, we're doing good. Okay. Thanks for hanging in there today. Mixolydian. Let's build a G Mixolydian real quick. Okay, G Mixolydian is in the key of C because the Mixolydian is the 5th mode of major key, or so G is the 5th of C. G is the 5th mode. G Mixolydian is the 5th mode of C. So this is the corresponding chord is G7. So this is a dominant scale as well. Mixolydian is a dominant scale. Okay. And that's pretty obvious. G, B, D, F. The chord is right there. It's very clear. 1, 3, 5, 7. The most clear one, probably. Okay. Lydian. Let's stay in the key of C. The Lydian mode is very, oh my gosh. Lydian mode is commonly used in jazz. And Lydian is the 7th mode. So staying in the key of C, we'll build a B Lydian because B is the 7th of C. Okay. B, D, F, A. That creates a half diminished sound. So what did we say? This is, yeah, that's right. So what did we say? Hang on a second.
Isn't it the 4th?
It is the 4th. I'm sorry. You're right. This should all go up to F. I was thinking Locrian when I said Lydian, but now that we're at Lydian, let's actually, I don't want to do Lydian yet. I want to stay with this dominant. So sorry about that. Thank you to whoever that was. This is Locrian. Locrian. Okay, Locrian is a dominant quality. B, D, F, A, half diminished over here when we saw the dominant chords. Half diminished belongs to the dominant family. So the chord that we get out of the scale 1, 3, 5, 7, B, D, F is a diminished triad. A is the minor 7, so it's a half diminished. So this chord symbol B, half diminished 7. We use this as a dominant chord because we saw that half diminished belongs to the dominant family. Okay. We see other. Okay, let's move to minor family. What time is it? Let's move to the major family. Well, oh, yeah, let's do minor family here. No, let's do major. Sorry, kind of waffling. Major family chords. So the first one is just the major scale. We won't do that one, but now let's do the Lydian mode. Lydian. So staying in the, actually, let's do C on this one. So the Lydian mode is the fourth, right? Lydian is the fourth of a major scale. So C is the fourth of what key?
G.
G. G has 1 sharp in it. It's F sharp. So a Lydian mode looks a lot like a major scale, no sharps and flats, but it has a raised fourth because it shares the key signature with G major. So if I stack this one up in thirds, the chord I get is C major 7 sharp 11. So Lydian belongs to the major family. Lydian is a major scale, major quality scale. You see that? And it just provides a different color. So we saw over here, major quality, the sharp 11, C major sharp 11 is a major family chord. It's a major chord. One other major chord that, or major scale that's really useful, and we talked about this, I think, a couple days ago, is the major pentatonic scale. So it was 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. Repeat that. So the most obvious chord to use this with is the C6 chord, right? We can use it with major 7 as well. It doesn't really get in the way. But this is a major family chord. And of course, the one we haven't put up here, and I'm not going to put it up here because it's kind of self-explanatory, is just the major chord itself, or the Ionian mode. The major chord belongs to that family. Okay. Now I'm going to introduce, well, let's do actually I should up here with dominance. Let me add a couple measures here. If you have room for this, or you can, sorry about this, or you can just add it at the end. Okay. Here's one we did a couple days ago. I introduced to you. It's the whole tone scale. Remember that? Whole tone scale. And I'll just tell you up front, this belongs to the dominant family. We'll see why here. Let's in the key of C. Since it's a dominant, I'm going to start on G. All right. So if I stack this up, 1, 3, 5, it's an augmented chord, but then it has a minor 7. So it's an augmented 7 chord. Can everybody see that? So it's very clearly a dominant quality chord or dominant quality scale. So it's a dominant chord scale. Okay, now we're going to introduce a couple of new ones. Two new ones. One is one that we'd mentioned before, and this one belongs to the dominant family, but I'm going to put it down here because it's a brand new scale that we haven't talked about, and it's kind of interesting and a little bit complicated. But that is the augmented scale. Okay, so we're going to do this a couple of ways. I'm going to build it first. I'm going to build a couple of augmented triads. Okay. Now let me spell it melodically. And then we're going to use another augmented triad a whole step above this one. If I spell that melodically, oh, sorry. Okay, so that's our source material for this scale. This is how it's derived from 2 augmented triads. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and build the scale underneath it. Okay. So in order, I'm gonna put all these notes that I have here in order of their closest relationship. So G, the next note is A, B, I think I just did this wrong. I think I just built, I'm sorry, I'm building a whole tone scale using a different method. So it's a, Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Forgive me for that. Please erase those notes. I got turned around as to which scale I was doing. So this is G augmented. That's the correct start. And then I started thinking about whole tone still. My apologies. We do the same thing, but we build the scale a half step above the root. So G sharp, let's just call it A flat. That'll be easier to see. This is for an augmented scale. Thanks for bearing with me. Natural. Okay, there we go. All right. So let's there we go. Okay, now we'll build the scale. G, A flat. The next note is B. Next note is C. D sharp. E natural. And that's it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. So this is an augmented scale. Very exotic sounding. Okay. And there are a couple ways to think about this. You can think about it as going a half step above the root of the chord to A flat, and then playing a half step below each subsequent chord tone of the augmented chord. So play leading tones. And if I keep going up the scale. I think the easiest way, that's the way a lot of jazz musicians think of it, because leading tones are very melodic, but really it's built on 2 augmented triads a half step apart. Okay. Now this is a hard one to kind of define what family it belongs to. Obviously you can use it on augmented chords, like on augmented 7 chord. It's used a lot there. I will say that it can be used on a minor chord, because if I change some of these, there's there's a C minor quality, although we have the E, so that you can force it in there. It doesn't really have a strong function. It just is a very exotic sound. So some people use it over a major chord, even C major, with this flat 6, which is interesting. They'll use it over a dominant chord, C dominant chord, and have this sharp 9 and plus the 3rd, which then becomes kind of bluesy, depending on the context. So it has a lot of usages, but we kind of tend to say that it belongs to a couple different families, either major. So it has 2, and I think on the homework I have this also. E augmented. Oh, that's for the chord itself. Oh, I don't have you doing that, so it doesn't matter. Okay, the usage, but it can belong to this, either the major family, right? Major family, the dominant family. I think those are the 2 most common. And if we look over here, we see that we get the dominant chord in the augmented chord in a dominant family of chords. We also get the augmented chord sometimes in a major. So those are the two families it belongs to. It doesn't really have a strong function, but it does have a cool sound, and so that's why people use it. Okay. All right, now let's go to minor, and then this will be quick. This doesn't take long at all, and then we'll be done for the day. Okay, so the next scale we need to talk about, of course, the minor, the natural minor or the harmonic minor scale belong to the minor family. We've already established that. The Dorian mode is a very common one that is used in jazz, extremely common. So in the key of C, the Dorian mode is built on the second scale degree of a major scale. So this is using the key of C. D is the second scale degree of C. All right. And this is the chord symbol that you'll see most of the time with this is D minor 7. So Dorian is a minor mode or a minor quality scale used in the minor family. And then 8. So let me just do natural minor. We'll do it like this because there are two words that we use for it, which you've maybe seen before. So this is called natural. I'm getting a little too fast here. Okay, here we go. All right, let me try this again. Minor or Aeolian mode. We do use that Aeolian term a lot. And this is a minor family. Belongs to the minor family of scales, chord scales. Okay. The other one that's very melodic and used a lot is this. We talked about this a couple days ago, maybe yesterday. I know we're coming down the end. People are getting tired, but what is this one called? Anybody remember?
Minor pentatonic.
Correct. Minor pentatonic. We'll also see that called A minor 6. It can be used on an A minor 6 chord as well. And obviously this is minor family scale. Has a very clear minor triad in it. Okay. All right. So here's the last one. And this is the one that is going to be the most complicated in the minor family. And the really tricky thing is that it also belongs to the dominant family. So this will take just probably 5 minutes or 10 minutes, but I think there might be some questions here. Okay. What did I do there? There we go. Gosh. Okay, there we go. All right, let me build this. Let's see, what key do I want to do this in? Let's do it on G. Let's do it on a G, starting on a G natural. All right, so this is called a couple of things. The most common label for this is the Super Locrian scale. It's also called the diminished whole tone scale. Now this one is I'm going to make sure I'm okay. This is a mode of a scale that we haven't talked about, but maybe you've heard of. It's called the melodic minor scale. Are you all familiar with the melodic minor? If anybody's not, just say no. The melodic minor scale. We'll build it right underneath here just in case, so you can see the relationship. Okay. So this is a mode of the A flat melodic minor scale. It's the 7th mode of the melodic minor scale, and we'll build that melodic minor in just a second so you can see clearly what I mean by melodic minor. But it's the 7th mode of the melodic minor scale, and it can be used, it's most often used on dominant quality chords. And let's look at that. G, B, we don't have a D, but we have an E sharp, which is the same, or E flat, same as D sharp. So we would use this on G augmented 7. But it also has some other colors in it. It has this A flat, if we take it up an octave, the 2nd becomes the 9th, has a flat 9, has a sharp 9, that can be called an A sharp, has a sharp 9. It has a sharp 11 in G, so the D flat's the same as C sharp. We see all these extensions. So it can also be used on sharp 11, sharp 9, flat 9. Like that. Won't let me do it, but that is a real chord. So maybe if I call it sharp 5, it would let me. But at any rate, it's used over dominant augmented chords. So that we said is in the key of, that'd be a 5 chord. The augmented 7 chord most frequently is used in, is it C major or C minor? You remember? Anybody? The C, the augmented dominant chord is most often used in a minor context because G is the dominant of C. C minor has an E flat in it. There we go. So that gives us, this scale gives it to us naturally, along with a lot of other cool color chords. Okay, so this can be used, and it is most commonly used as a dominant chord. It can also be used as a minor chord because of this minor quality here. But this is the most commonly it's used as a dominant chord. Now let me build the A flat melodic minor under here just so you can see it. And this will be the last thing before I open it up for questions here. Here's A flat melodic minor. Okay. Now, in jazz, we only use the ascending form. So for those of you who aren't familiar with melodic minor, it has a group of notes going up and a different group of notes going down. The group of notes going down is just natural minor. But going up, we have a lower, in relationship to the root, we have a minor third. So we have a lowered third. But then we have a major six, excuse me, and a major seven. So we have flat 3, natural 6, natural 7, major 6, major 7. That's the ascending form of melodic minor. Okay. And if we compare that to the G superlocrian or diminished whole tone scale, we see that if we start on G, 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 A flat, B flat, B flat, C flat is enharmonic with B, D flat, E flat, F. So they have all the same notes. We just start and stop on the 7th scale degree of the melodic minor. Remember, we called the 7th scale degree of a major, the 7th mode of a major, we called it Locrian. Yeah, the 7th mode of major scale is called a Locrian scale. The 7th mode of melodic minor is also called a Locrian scale, but it's called a super Locrian scale. Don't know why that terminology came about, but it does sound super. Sorry. Let me play that with a chord next to it so you can hear how colorful and interesting it sounds. It's got a lot of tension and colorful qualities to it. Sorry. So it sounds nice. Now, I want to explain really quickly the reason that it's also called a diminished whole tone scale. Remember, diminished scales we talked about were symmetrical, and whole tones are symmetrical as well. So diminished scale, the formula was whole, half, or another form of it is to flip that around inverted and go half, whole. The first half of this scale is diminished or inverted diminished. Half, whole, half to A flat to B flat, whole, B flat to B, half. So half, whole, half. Then there's B is kind of like the pivot chord or the pivot note. So then B, from B to the end of the scale, it's whole tone. B is a whole step away from C sharp or D flat. D flat's a whole step to E flat, whole step to F, a whole step to G. So that's why another term for it is diminished whole tone. It's kind of what we call a hybrid scale, mashing up 2 different scales. So diminished in the first half and actually all the way to D flat. And then this B, D flat section, we transition to a whole tone scale. Does that make sense to everybody? Everybody can see the math there? Pretty good. Any questions about that? That's the last scale that's on the homework and the most complicated one, and the most advanced one. Any questions there? Okay. So I didn't get to 2 other scales and I don't want to spend any more of your time. So on the homework, or I'm sorry, we'll talk about this in the morning again, but on the quiz tomorrow, there's one other scale that I asked you to identify the family of chords, and we'll just skip that one. It's the very last one on the quiz. It's number 2, quiz 4, number 2. It's a descending scale, and we'll talk about those tomorrow. I'll kind of touch on them. They're very easy. They're important scales, but
Saturday.
I'm sorry, on Monday. Thank you. So we'll get to that on Monday. Okay. Questions? Anybody have questions? Thank you for hanging around. It's right at noon. Hope you had a good week. I know things are moving fast. I told you they'd move really fast. Tomorrow, Monday, we will do the same regimen. So we'll do our review the homework, do quiz, and then we start on real chord progressions, and it'll get fun. We'll listen to some examples in music of that. So I'll actually have some recordings. I think we'll do a little short Martin Luther King tribute at the beginning of the class too, since it'll be MLK Day on Monday. All right, so I'll say goodbye to anybody who needs to leave, and I'll stick around if anybody has questions. So thanks for a great week. See you all. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My quick question.
Sure.
Do you answer emails over the weekend?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll probably email later with questions.
Yeah, I think actually the best way to get a hold of me probably is by text.
By text, okay.
I'll respond a lot faster, and my phone number is at the top of the syllabus.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
Mike,
Bye, Lauren.
could you zoom out to see the whole page? I want to get a screenshot.
Yeah. Do you want, tell me when it's far enough. Let's see. So there's, that's not quite both pages. Hang on. Do you want me to go out further? Let me make this screen bigger too. That's the best I can do. Well, that gets it all in there. Is that good?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Have a nice weekend.
All right. Thanks. We'll see you.
Hey, this is just to make sure when there's a chord like a 13th chord and it's like C with the like negative minor sign and then it says 13, is the minor indicating the quality of the 7th?
Yeah. So it's indicating the quality of the 7th and the 3rd.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then yeah. So then remember we said like the number is the highest naturally or diatonically occurring extension, right? And then any alterations to any other extensions occur in parentheses after that.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
Have a nice weekend.
All right. We'll see you, man. See you Monday.
Yeah.